Good morning and welcome. Happy Hump Day. You are listening to Bat Talk with Sharona. I'm your host. My name is Sharona. As always, I thank you for tuning in. We are back. We are on a bi-weekly schedule for the time being. I'm very excited to welcome a new guest today. Ed Kracz is going to be joining me to give us another scouting report on Demarco Murray and Daniel Kelly. We'll talk about the Philadelphia Eagles and their quarterback decision and a rather surprising and historic decision to start Carson Wentz. That will be in the last segment of the show. He'll be calling in at noon his time, 11 o'clock my time, to have that discussion. But first up, we're going to play our series, Chopping It Up with Matt, where I sit down with my good friend Matt Wood and we talk about a variety of topics. And last night we sat down to talk about what was a rather shocking thing to me, the closure of ITT Tech, the ITT Technical Institutes. I was not aware of all of the issues surrounding that institution. It's to me, it's a big story. It's a big thing. It's a big deal in education. And education is it's kind of a hot topic these days with a lot of discussion about the crushing student debt that so many experience and the breakdown of our educational institute. So Matt and I sat down and we talked about that last night. But first, some housekeeping. I want to thank all of the guests who've donated their time to come on this show. I want to send out an apology to, once again, to Coach Daniel Seahorn and to my good friend Chels at Chels is Right on Twitter for the technical issues that we had last week. We have started recording via Skype, and Skype updated its application, and the recording application that we have been using updated as well. And Skype was experiencing some issues. If you use Blog Talk Radio, you're aware that the Skype interface with BTR is still not currently working because of that new update. And so because of those updates, we just ran into some technical issues with the audio, unfortunately, on those two interviews. But it was a great discussion. I hope to get Coach Daniel Seahorn back on the show. He's a great college football resource. You should follow him. We talked about college football polls and how ludicrous they are until about week 4 into the season. And as it turned out, when the games actually started, what a great weekend, by the way, right, of college football. When the games actually started, a lot of teams in that top 10, top 15 range struggled, and several of them lost. So there was quite a bit of shakeup in those polls this week. Well, hopefully we can get him back on and we'll talk about that. Maybe we'll talk about that on Friday's show a little bit. I want to get Chels back on the show. She and I had a great discussion about Cam Newton and about Colin Kaepernick, and we started our discussion, which we're still going to have, regarding Nate Parker, the Birth of a Nation director, and a guy who has a very concerning past history with a rape allegation when he was in college, and how we talk about that and how we reconcile that with a project, with an artistic endeavor that is important. The Nat Turner story is important, and so hopefully we can get Chels back on to talk about that. It's an important discussion. Certainly in light of what went down yesterday, if as I was watching my timeline with Ezekiel Elliott and the decision, it's not really surprising, the decision not to pursue charges against him, not to prosecute those charges against him. How we talk about these things, always important. And of course, you've got the situation with Fox News settling the Gretchen Carlson lawsuit, and there were some other settlements as well with some other employees. Those were not disclosed, at least not to my knowledge. We'll have to check on that. And some rather surprising news: Greta Van Susteren going off the air with her show, which was one of the few, in my opinion, one of the few good things that Fox News actually did. Probably a good. It sounded like she was going to leave anyway, which I think is a good decision by her. I'm sure that she'll land somewhere relatively soon. It sounds like there were details in her contract that's going to prevent her from doing anything in the immediate future. But I look forward to seeing where she lands and what happens with her program, with her shows. It's interesting, and I want to say one thing. I was watching my timeline while I was working, and it came across the timeline. Someone mentioned that the Fox News head, Roger Ailes, he received a buyout. I believe it was like $40 million, something like that, and the settlement to Gretchen Carlson was $20 million, and the point was made that even in situations like this, women get half the pay or whatever, and it's a good point, but I don't want people to undersell how significant this settlement is, because it is a significant settlement, not just in terms of monetary amount, which it is, but also in the fact that Fox News was forced to publicly apologize. That is practically, it's unprecedented. It's practically unheard of. Most times when you have a settlement of this magnitude, there's a lot of denial going on. We didn't do anything wrong. This is a business decision. We're going to settle this for business reasons, but that's not what happened here. There was a public apology. There was actually an acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and I can't undersell how important that is. That we acknowledge that these things are wrong, and that we recognize and understand the damage that misogyny and things like this do, and how it hinders women in employment, and the lasting impact it has on their lives. So it's very significant, and that settlement is historically going to be very, very important. There's no question in my mind about that. So I just had to mention that, because it was astounding to me to sit and watch that and watch how that went down. And I think a lot of it was because of two reasons. First of all, the bravery of these women in coming forward, and the solidarity that you're seeing, because a lot of women, once Gretchen Carlson came forward, it empowered more women to come forward with their stories and to share their stories. And if a united a united group is always more powerful and stronger than a divided group. And it was really, it was touching to see, and heartwarming and encouraging to see how other women rallied around her and supported her. And I think that changed the conversation. It changed everything about that situation. So, it's important, and I just had to point out how important that was. So, all right. So, some programming notes before we get to chopping it up. Tonight I'm going for our last Google Hangout. Google is doing away with its Hangouts, although you'll still be able to, technically, what they're doing is moving everything to YouTube Live, which, if you're familiar with Hangouts, it play those Hangouts played on Google Plus, as well as were broadcast on your YouTube channel, and the videos were uploaded to your YouTube channel. So now you're going to be doing everything through YouTube Live, and so um, from a technical standpoint, things aren't really going to change much. You're just not going to have that Google Hangout interface. So going for two with Zach and Sharona last show on Google Hangouts. Maybe Zach and I will do some Facebook Live stuff, but at least for the interim future, we're going to be hosting those over on YouTube Live, and so I'll be tweeting out a link to my YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. Watch the show tonight. We'll do a wrap-up of our Going for Two fantasy draft. We'll talk a little bit about, for the first time in a long time, I'm going to be attending a Titans game this weekend. I'm going to the season opener between the Tennessee Titans and the Minnesota Vikings. I'm very excited about that. Although I have to say, as I was getting ready to packing and getting ready for that, I became super annoyed again over this whole clear bag thing, which I had kind of forgotten because I hadn't as a fan. I had not attended any sporting events, and so I've got to try to find mine for one. And then it's just the super annoying thing, and that's really kind of part of the reason why I quit doing that. The fan experience for me, it changed the fan experience for me because of having to carry this clear plastic bag and have your tampons and everything shining out there for all the world to see, and it doesn't hold enough, and it's just annoying. It's just super annoying. But that aside, I'm excited to see Zach again and to attend a game. So we may be doing some Facebook Lives over the weekend. I'm sure shenanigans will go down, and we'll be posting some fun stuff about that. So be looking for that. And tune in tonight, Going for Two with Zach and Sharona. And then tomorrow, I'm going to sit down with my buddies, Ted, Todd, and Lee from Baseball, Beer, and Barbecue. That show airs every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We're going to sit down on tomorrow around noon my time and record that show, and I'll be talking about NFL kickoff weekend and some other things. We'll probably talk some Tennessee Vols as well. And then after that, I'm going to sit down with my friend Andy Carlson from Purple for the Wind, and we're going to record a segment where we preview the Titans versus the Vikings game. I'm very excited about that. And we're going to actually play that segment on Friday's show, which is a big show. And I'm happy to have Jeff Lloyd, who is a great guy, great football resource. He has followed the Jets for a long time and is a fantasy football guy. We'll have him on to talk about the Jets and the Titans' recent acquisition of Jason Morrow. By the way, I'm writing about that, more on that in a little bit. And also Lisa London is going to be joining me with your weekly fantasy football fix. And so that's a big show. I'm very excited about Friday. We'll be tweeting out details of that. It will air as usual at 10 o'clock a.m. Central Time. And stay tuned for some big news about the Zone Blitz, the Tuesday night show. What had been the Tuesday night webcast show, Google Hangout, that I co-hosted along with Kate Arher, who covers the Cleveland Browns for NFL Female, and Sonia Greenfield, who covers the Detroit Lions for NFL Female. With the changes with Google Hangouts, we're going to mix that thing up a little bit and redo it. So we're working on some kind of fun, smaller, shorter stuff for you guys. So stay tuned in for some details for that. And real quick, before we play that interview with Matt Wood, also check out, I'm very proud and honored to be a part of Inside the Pylon this season, where I'll be doing a lot of different things. First of all, I'm going to be keeping a diary of my journey into daily fantasy football, daily fantasy sports. It's something, if you've been listening to the shows that I've been doing, for the past several years. It's something that I've been threatening to do, promising to do, but I haven't yet done it, or at least I hadn't until this season. But I'm going to be doing it this season. My first diary entry went up about a week and a half ago, I suppose. My week one selections. That was kind of fun, and of course, we'll be doing that every week throughout the season. And then a couple of days ago, my first article, non-fantasy article, was posted regarding the Titans, their run game, the acquisition of Ben Jones during the off season, which I think is going to be huge for not just their run game, but for their offense in general. So check that out. Exotic Smash Mouth, a love story that was fun to write. And as I mentioned, I'm working on a very short article right now on Jason Morrow, who is a tight end the Titans just recently picked up. Hopefully that will drop maybe this afternoon, maybe this evening, or sometime tomorrow. We'll be tweeting out a link to that. All right, so that's it for all the preview stuff. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, my chit-chat with Matt Woods, so stay tuned in. You are listening to Back Talk with Sharona. All right, welcome back to, now Matt's going to have to help me count here. Are we on 5 or 6, Matt?
Oh, I'm starting to lose count now.
Yeah, me too. I think
it's 5 or 6. Yeah, let's go with that.
5 or 6, yeah. Close enough. Ballpark, close enough. It's been a great series, chopping it up with Matt. And this week we're going to talk about Matt always is so great to tip me off about some great stuff that's going on, and it had not come across my timeline, which I'm kind of surprised. What is kind of really big news, news that is going to affect secondary education and education in general, and it's going to be an interesting story really to watch. I didn't know that some of the background stuff was going on, but we'll go ahead and let Matt kind of introduce us to that. But it's the story about ITT Tech shutting down, and it sounds like there had been some shenanigans, and Matt actually went to school there. So we'll get a little bit of background from him about ITT Tech, and it sounds like they had what was at one time a good relationship with the GI Bill and the military.
Well, so a little bit of background. I got out of the military. I didn't really. I mean, I had a skill from the military, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to learn programming and do that, and that wasn't technically a job in the military at that time. So I first called area colleges. Now this was in Michigan, so I called Aquinas in Central Michigan and Grand Valley State and Michigan State. I called them all, and they were pretty much like, sorry, we don't at that time we don't really offer what you're looking for non-traditional students. Essentially, their night programs were more for MBAs or master's programs than starting a bachelor's degree. So I had few options, and the only school in my area that offered programming was ITT Tech. And I go there, and I had to fill out one of them, what are they, Rexlers or something? I don't know. It's like 13 questions, and somehow I passed it. Well, not somehow, but I passed their little gate, whatever gate that is. It's got to be pretty low. Because, it was really simple stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, the GI Bill, it covers 36 months of education. Now, if you did it...
36 months. That's 3 years.
Yeah,
okay.
So the hypothetical was if you took college regularly, how you usually do, it should pay for your full degree.
Okay.
And that was only tuition. It didn't cover books, but they did... now, this is the post 9/11 GI Bill, but they did send a monthly like stipend, like a rent check, type. I call it the rent check.
Yeah.
Pay their rent. Yeah, so I doubled up on classes the first few quarters, so I wouldn't have to go, a full year on student loans. So my student loans are actually relatively small compared to the folks that are there now or who I graduated with. And my experience there was mostly positive. I learned my skill. There was a couple times some instructors seemed very light on the material. Like I'm not sure they really knew what they were doing. But I did learn. I did have some great instructors that I still communicate with today that work in their field because they generally wanted to help foster a programming community. And obviously, I got a great gig out of it. I kind of had to do it on my own. I didn't go through ITT testing, but overall, generally positive experience. Now, a lot of folks weren't so lucky. There was definitely cracks in the foundation when I started going there.
You talking about with ITT?
Yes.
Okay.
So the first quarter, because it's 11-week quarters, and it's a week off between each quarter, is a bunch of introductory classes. I mean, and they start they go middle, and up. So it's a lot of remediation. And I mean, I understand it to a point because, it's not just kids, 18 just getting out of high school. I mean, these are 40-year-old people trying to get new skills to, enhance their spot in the workforce. So that was like a lot of remediation. So that, I didn't really see anything. But the second quarter, we had this writing class, and I wrote the paper because I learned in 7th grade how to write a paper. And, and I mean, these people obviously had to have as well. And by the way, these aren't maybe there were some 40-year-olds in there, but most of those folks were about my age, in their mid-20s.
Okay.
And I handed mine in, and the instructor wanted to use it as an example of how to write a paper. So I was like, sure. I mean, she changed the name and everything.
Right.
But then she showed examples of other people's writings, and it was just atrocious. And I'm not talking content. I'm talking about formatting. There would be people who ended sentences with 3 periods, all lowercase. There was one where someone did some of these papers are supposed to be pages long. They got their point across in a paragraph and things of that nature. I mean, and a lot of these students were criminal justice students. Now, I don't know if they need that to be a police officer or a paralegal. I'm not sure exactly what the criminal justice degree got. Obviously, something in criminal justice.
Right.
I'm like, oh man, you guys are going to be writing a lot of stuff. You have to brush the stuff up on this stuff, and so there was that. And then seeing them the next quarter, oh yeah, I passed that class. And man, maybe they turned their stuff around and got it, but there was some people I'm like, how did you make it through to the next round? And there are allegations of people just being passed because, hey, they fail, that could stop funding and things.
Yeah, I mean, I do wonder what kind of reporting system. This Washington Post article doesn't go into that great of detail about what it's a for-profit educational institute, and we think of our of other educational institutions, like just throwing one out there, University of Memphis and University of Tennessee and Ohio State and all of that. But I mean, they have to turn a profit too. I mean,
Ohio State's not a real college. It's just it's a shithole in a shithole town.
Yeah. Well.
By the way, I'm a Michigan fan, so I'm going to say that.
That's so funny. But you know what I mean. I mean, it's not like these educational institutes aren't out here fundraising and raising money and doing this and doing that, and
Oh yeah. I mean, and I'm not. State schools, your traditional colleges, yeah, they, you can be not for profit and turn a profit, I mean, they have to make revenue and.
Well, I mean, technically, although I think that might have actually, for a long, long time, the NFL is a not quote unquote not for profit organization. I mean, yeah.
The money's supposed to be funneled back into the
right.
Yeah.
So how many people were typically in your classes?
So, now mind you, people from different backgrounds and different walks of life, maybe they start going there having the best intentions. Maybe they can't do it. Maybe something else gets in the way. So I saw a lot of people when I started, and there weren't very many people left when I graduated. I would say after about the third quarter, that's the big drop off, because that's usually when you really start getting into meat and potatoes of your degree program, and so that's when it starts dropping off. And there's conspiracy theories and stuff like, oh, it's after that if you take those classes, then you have to actually pay back the money. If you do it before that, you're fine, which I doubt is completely true.
Right.
But and so they're like, oh, they make all these harder classes so they can get that money. And no, I think I think every school has some sort of academic hazing. You have the people who want to learn this stuff, and people who just think it's going to be cool to do and aren't really into it.
There's levels to it. There's no doubt, and you have to. Things get progressively harder and all of that. I mean, that's sort of the foundation of what we do, in terms of what our educational system is here. And it's different in other countries, but that's kind of the deal.
Oh yeah, and then plus, it's like this is a for-profit school. These degrees are handed out, at a cost of how much a doctor has to pay to go to school. These are $90,000 to $100,000 degrees, which I'm sure at a state school it's considerably less.
I mean, I don't know. It's interesting how much state tuition has skyrocketed, and of course now you've got programs. Here in Tennessee, the lottery kicks in, and parents are able now to purchase, kind of like a life insurance fund. It's an educational fund, and certainly there are different states do those things different ways. But they're, a degree anymore. Of course, there's a big debate right now regarding student loans and student loan debt, which is a very real thing. It's crushing a large number of people who have become saddled with it, and so it's an ongoing discussion right now.
Oh yeah, I mean, you have your parents telling you, hey, go to school. It's the only way you're going to get a job. And at that time that was probably true, but I mean that kind of took away from all the vocational and technical training.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, somebody doesn't want to be in, a businessman or a salesperson or, developer or anything. I mean, maybe they just want to fix cars. There's nothing wrong with that. So they can go to community college and get those certifications and everything. And you can still make a lot of money. You can be a carpenter and things. And I think, like that kind of thinking is starting to come back around. Like, oh, hey, there's other jobs other than going to an office all day that I could still make a decent living doing.
I definitely think that's coming around. And for a long, long time, I'll have to tell this story. For a long, long time, I thought that was the way to go to gear our. And I'm not sure that I've changed my mind, but I just haven't thought about it in a few years. But I thought that the way to go was to start, with a broad base, but then funnel kids more into specialized areas, so, with an internship included, like auto mechanics, like plumbing, like, various other trades, because I felt like our educational system was not adequately preparing kids for the real world.
Yeah, and I remember, and I mean, if I had it in high school, you probably had it in high school, because I think I was probably on the last lines of I guess, previous generation type schooling. And, you would have kids, what was it? They were actually freshmen. They were doing half day of high school, and then they would go to the vocational school.
Yes.
To trade their learning.
Yes, that was definitely a thing.
Yeah, and I don't want to say they completely got rid of that. I haven't obviously been to high school in like 15 years, but I thought that was a good thing. But at the same time, when I was a teenager, what the hell do I know except everything, because I'm a teenager, right? And I'm like going, oh man, throwing their life away. They could go to college and get this awesome high paying job. I guess we all drank the Kool-Aid. But obviously, look how much welders pay and plumbers. I mean, heck, if something goes kaput in your house, you're looking
electricians.
You're looking at those invoices going, geez, what does it cost?
Electricians, HVACs, and I mean, what difference is it to, and I hate to say that it's all a racket, but in a way, it is, and, getting into how bloated these colleges and higher educational institutions have become, in terms of administration and all of that.
Oh yeah.
And the money involved, and what they say, power corrupts. Absolutely, and there's definitely a lot of graft, I think, involved in this. But when you think about, which one is better, a 4-year liberal arts degree where all you can do basically is blog or say, would you like fries with that, or a specialized degree where you can fix plumbing or electrical, and people will pay you to do that. I mean, they're not paying. Ask any blogger out here. The writing, journalism, and writing it's a tough business.
Oh yeah, that's it's like that kind of depends on the individual. It's like what is best, but I mean you saw it with the recession. You had all these kids going to law school because hey, everybody needs a lawyer type thing. And then the recession happened. Everybody's like, "Hey, we don't need as much lawyers."
Well, the legal field has definitely undergone a lot of changes. Excuse me, and there's a glut. There's a glut of lawyers. There was already a glut of lawyers in the state of Tennessee when when they accredited 2 more law schools, which was absolutely ridiculous. But again, it's all a racket.
Yeah. I mean, I can't really speak to everybody's education and how they come out and things. And like at least with ITT Tech, one of their selling points, and I'm going to say 2 things here. One of their selling points is, we'll help you find a job.
Right.
It depends. If whatever the bare minimum was to meet that requirement without saying false advertising, that's probably what they did. They kind of help you write a resume and they say, hey, there's a job fair coming up. And it depends on the location and things like that. And sometimes
overall, they're not very good at getting you jobs.
Yeah. I mean, an instructor may, go like, hey guys, like I think you're all cool or really talented or whatever, so give me your resumes, I'll hand them out to some folks. But that's the instructor taking it upon themselves to help their students.
It's interesting. I was and I'm looking at the article right now. I just hadn't given it any thought, but there were, according to the Washington Post, there were more than 8,000 employees of this institution. There were around 35,000 students, and they had 137 campuses, across the United States, and that's a lot of displacement in terms of employees and students and resources.
Yeah. I mean, I really feel bad for the students there, in the sense of, hey, this place obviously is the place that can fit my need for what I want to do and how it fits my schedule, and all that jazz. And they may know the risk they're taking in terms of like their student loan debt, or may not, but they want to better themselves. They want to try to provide a better future for either themselves or their family. And you kind of get, let's say you're like 2.5 years in, you're trying to get your bachelor's. Now it's like, hey, we're closed. Sorry. You have to try to find a place for those credits. And it even says right there in the fine print in their commercials, credits are unlikely to transfer. I mean, you're sitting there going, well, shoot, now I have to kind of try to find something else that's similar to this. Hopefully University of Phoenix has it, or DeVry, or what are the other ones? Because they're obviously going to that school because they need that type of flexibility.
Right. Yeah, it's really sad, and I was curious as to what kind of transferabilities there was. I'm talking with Matt Wood, by the way. This is our weekly segment, Chopping It Up, and tonight we're talking about, we're playing this obviously for the Wednesday podcast. We're talking about the shutdown of ITT Tech and what that means for our educational institutions and for, unfortunately, for the students who are involved there. It sounded like, speaking of Graf, and it sounded like they had been under investigation. If I knew that, I had forgotten it. The U.S. Department of Education said that they put them basically on probation, last year because they were unable to account for money, and their accreditation was in jeopardy because of some shenanigans that that the government felt like they were doing. But I mean, do you feel like, this is an unfair question, but in terms of the quality of your education, and I know that you're a guy who's going to educate yourself, but in terms of the quality of your education, how did you feel about it?
For the most part, positive. But like I said, it was the instructors, these just weren't, save for maybe 2 or 3 that were just kind of, you only had them once and you never saw them again, probably due to like us as a class giving a poor review. But, all the instructors that we had were great. You probably had them more than had them for more than one type of class, at least for the programming part, like the gen ed stuff that can be whoever. But yeah, so they were really good folks. But I can't say that for every degree program and every area.
You can't even say that in so-called nonprofit educational institutions. Right. And I'll never forget, I dropped this class, but I'll never forget, I signed up for a night class. Maybe it was an accounting class. I don't remember what kind of class it was. And I'm not trying to knock anybody or knock anything here. I will just say this. I could not. It was someone who was not a native of this country, and I could not understand it. The communication barrier was insurmountable, and I wasn't going to be able to learn anything because I couldn't. And so I ended up dropping the class, and then I had another. That was one instance that comes to mind. And then another instance, that comes to mind was just simply a class where the instructor was terrible. And I ended up having to, I believe it was a chemistry class, some sort of science class. And now my father was a chemist and actually taught it. I ended up having to retake that class because it was the instructor was so poor that then when I retook it, I aced it. I got an A in the class, and I was always a good student. I think I got a D in it, and that was the first bad grade I had ever gotten, and I cried like for days. I cried, and I waited too long. I was proud, and I thought I can do this. I can do this. This isn't, and so I waited too long to drop it, and it was just a situation where I had to stick it out, and and I ended up retaking it, and that was fine. But there's you're only as good as the instructional environment.
Yeah. The two instances, the guys there, I don't know. I don't know how they got the job. Maybe they interview well. I don't know. Yeah. But we had to really go out of our way to kind of teach ourselves what the material was in order to do well in the class. And we after every quarter, you get these review things, which I don't know why they made us fill them out, because it doesn't seem like they went anywhere. But I mean, there was some stuff about database design, and it just didn't. None of it was right, because some of the things you're like, I've kind of learned this before in other classes, just as a secondary thing. And I'm like, this just doesn't seem right. This seems way off, and so yeah, those were like the two instances, but everything else, the instructors, really kind of went out of their way for some of us. There was one instructor for one programming class where the dude would not help. I was like, hey, I'm having trouble understanding this. He's like, well, just put a debugger on it and step through. I'm like, yeah, I don't know what the hell you're. And so I actually ended up going on a forum going, hey, I know it's against the rules for homework and stuff. I'm not asking anybody to do it for me, but this is what I got. I know it's wrong. Where am I going wrong? And one of the people in that forum, really broke it down, made me understand and everything, and I got it. But yeah, that was probably one of the only times I actually had to reach out externally, to get proper instruction.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you, and I don't mean to interrupt, and by the way, I'm talking with Matt Wood. We're about to wrap up our weekly segment, Chopping It Up, and we're talking about the closure of ITT Technical Institute. And one thing I was curious about, and it's interesting, I'm so glad to have you on, what perception have you experienced in, out in the quote-unquote real world with this type of degree? And as when you tell people, I've got this, I have this degree from ITT, what do you experience? Not just from employers, but from, like the general public.
Well, a lot of people don't know. But so I really haven't experienced anything from the general public. I really haven't experienced anything from employers either, because
it's so weird because
I see interviews and then I go to work, and I mean, I would assume if I was doing something bad, they would have fired me.
Oh yeah.
But
I think we can assume that, Matt.
Yeah. So, but there, I mean, I've read online, and the internet's so stupid in terms of people will say one thing and then people parrot it, and you don't even know what's right or whatever. But there are stories of people saying that they're in HR, and if they see IT Tech on their resume, they put them in the note pile. And obviously there is a lot of people who take offense to that, going, hey, that guy could have Harvard on his thing and be a complete fucking idiot.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
It's like there's, you do have a barrier here. It's like
I was wondering if there was at least anecdotal, evidence.
There is some stigma to it, because, like, how I was saying earlier, how it seemed perceived that some of these students were just passed along, either to keep the money flowing, or maybe they just didn't care. I don't know. I mean, these teachers made, at least in this area, $1,500 per quarter. You got $1,500 for 11 weeks of instruction. So maybe they just didn't care. But my instructors did, and they had day jobs, so they probably didn't care about the pay so much. But there's definitely that stigma of like, oh, okay, so you pass them along. Obviously, they're not learning anything, but you keep passing them along. They got their degree. They go to these places. Maybe they interview and get hired on, and within a week they find out, hey, they're an idiot. Okay, and maybe the same place just keeps going back to the same well, and eventually they go, oh man, everybody from ITT Tech sucks. I don't know. I've never experienced it yet. I hope I never have to.
It's just kind of a weird concept because, and I'm not saying this is good, but it's definitely a thing, in that when you do go to what is commonly referred to as like a football mill, like, Tennessee or Ohio State, like you mentioned, or any of the other schools with, Kentucky with their basketball program or what have you, kind of because fans kind of self-identify like that, if that makes any sense. And so, it's like it's almost well, it is kind of a networking, and so I just wondered how that was when you went to an institution like that. Do you maintain contact with anybody that you went to school with?
Oh yeah. The people I graduated with, we're still great friends.
Oh, that's awesome.
We helped each other out and things like that. We still come to each other for advice in terms of our things, and we all have jobs. As far as I know, they're good paying. I don't know. But yeah, everybody that I graduated with, I'm pretty much still in contact with. And we pretty much talk on pretty much we speak daily. I shouldn't say speak, but like chat and stuff, right. Google Hangouts and everything. Today, actually the past week and a half, because there was articles here and there about, hey, maybe IT Tech is closing. Who knows? This is happening or that. So we've been kind of discussing it, and there's definitely, the consensus is fuck ITT Tech, which I can agree. You did predatory practices, and you can be pissed off about that, and obviously those students that are currently there could possibly have their loans forgiven. Especially even if they graduated within 120 days of the school closing. But obviously we graduated a few years ago, so obviously we will not be privy to such benefits. And you have to think about this too, is like, that school shuts down, those loans are forgiven by the government, but it's like those loans come from taxpayer money. And while, it may be considered the right thing to do to forgive those loans, because it wasn't anything in their control. They didn't like rise up and overthrow the CEO of the college and demand the school shut down, But you gotta think, it was saying over $500 million annually ITT Tech received in taxpayer money.
Crazy.
And they said like, hey, the first email I got from ITT Tech, and I don't know, I think it's because I'm an alumni, so I get all their news. And they're like, hey, we're no longer accepting new students next quarter. So whoever's currently enrolled will still be able to go to school, but we're not taking any new students. Right. And then came the report of all the instructors getting paid on their off week, because they get paid like every 2 weeks, I guess. So on their off week, apparently everybody got paid plus a little extra in terms of their PTO or anything that they had. And I was like, well, they don't pay that out for nothing. And then today, obviously, the hammer got
big hammer. Very interesting stuff, Matt. It's always such a pleasure. Tell everybody out there where they can find you, and we'll have to find something. We still haven't circled back around. There's an interesting thing about 538 that I'd kind of like to discuss. We'll find something to talk about next week.
Oh yeah, I'm always game.
So where can everybody find you out there?
Yeah, they can find me on Twitter at Woodstock, W00DSTOK.
All right, welcome back. That was my weekly segment with my good friend Matt Wood, chopping it up with Matt. It's always fun to talk to him. We'll have to find something good to talk about next week. I've let Matt kind of pick the topics for the last couple of weeks, and he's done a great job. I promised him, though, that for next week I would pick one. So we'll see what we come up with. There was an interesting article that was posted in Slack, the Inside the Pylon Slack, that talked about ESPN and 538. I'd really like to talk about that. I may have to try and talk Matt into it. He didn't seem all that enthused when I sent it to him. I have to pull an executive command or something. By the way, I forgot to mention in our blitz of things that we're going to be doing over the next couple of days, that tomorrow morning I was supposed to be on with my good friends at Talkback Live, 7:30 Yahoo Sports. I was supposed to be on this morning to talk some Titans, but we had a little bit of some scheduling issues, so I'll be on in the morning. I think probably around 8:10, which was when I was originally scheduled for this morning. If that changes, I'll let you know. But tune in for that. We will be talking about the Titans. We'll talk about NFL kickoff. Always fun to talk to them. We had a Christmas tree discussion last time. That was a funny thing that we ran into, and obviously I'm looking forward to sitting down with Andy Carlson tomorrow and recording a segment for his great Purple for the Win podcast. Big news for him, now an ESPN show. So I'm excited about that. And again, we'll be playing that Friday morning on this podcast. We're going to preview Titans versus Vikings. I'm very excited about that game. I love the Minnesota Vikings, and interested to get Andy's take on their quarterback situation. And I'm such a big fan of Mike Zimmer, and really, was disappointed. I wanted the Titans to hire him when they after they fired Mike Munchak, and they had him in town, and man, that's the one that got away. They let him get away, and they turned around and hired Ken Whisenhunt, a hire that turned out to be not the best one in the world. And of course now they have a new head coach, Mike Mularkey, and I bet Andy and I will talk about that too. I like Mike Mularkey more than a lot of people do, and I understand the with thinking that was a great hire, and I understand the NFL is a results oriented league, and there have not been a lot of results with Mike Mularkey, but I just don't think that he was ever put in a good position to be successful. And combined with their new hire of John Robinson, another hire, frankly, I was not all that thrilled about, but I'm happy so far to be proven wrong. I think I like what he has done. I did not particularly like them. I like that they traded out of that number one spot, but I did not like them trading back up into the top 10 to draft an offensive tackle, although I like the player a lot. So we'll see how that turns out. But I think so far I have to give positive grades to John Robinson and the job that he has done. So we'll see how that how that works out for them. But anyway, I'm excited to sit down with Andy and have that discussion. And of course, it's been a while since I've talked to Lee and Ted and the guys at Beer Barbecue, and I'm sure that we'll talk some Tennessee Volunteers as well. Some of those guys are located in Knoxville, and we typically do talk about college football, and there's certainly a lot to talk about. I can't wait to get Daniel Sehorn. Hopefully he'll forgive me for two recording snafus with the situation with Skype and the recording app, the issues that we had there. I've got a new app. It's so far working like a charm. So I'm happy about that, and again, apologies to him and Chels both for the issue that we ran into next week. And then, of course, on Friday we'll have Jeff Lloyd on the show to talk about the Jets. Jeff is also a new guest, a first-time guest, so I'm happy to have him. We will welcome back Lisa London. Lisa has been so gracious to donate her time to come on the show and talk about a lot of different things. Her Miami Dolphins. We talk about fantasy football a lot. So I'm sure we'll be focusing mostly on fantasy football with the start of the season, and so many wow, so many things, changes going on. So I'm looking forward to that, and then again we'll replay that podcast segment with Andy Carlson on that show as well. And I'm looking forward to tomorrow morning, and of course to tonight with Zach, my buddy Zach, our weekly Going for Two show. And again, if you haven't checked out my work at Inside the Pylon, please give it a read. My first submission was what is going to be first in a series of a diary for them, where I chronicle my journey into daily fantasy sports. It's something that I've been wanting to do, that I've been intending to do, and I'm finally getting around to it. So I decided to chronicle that for you guys. We'll revisit that at the end of the season, see how well I did. You can feel free to critique me, by the way. I don't mind. Critique me all you want. I say it with my chest. I post my fantasy teams. I'm pretty open about the decisions that I make in terms of fantasy football. So, if you have any thoughts about it, you can hit me up out there in Twitter sphere at Sports by Sharona. And if you want to be a guest on the show, hit me up at Sports by Sharona out there on Twitter. Always happy to welcome new guests to talk about different teams and different topics. Kind of a regular staple. We talk about fantasy football every week here. We haven't gotten into betting on this show in a while. That's when I was writing for NGSC Sports. That was something that I covered every week. Talked about betting lines and what have you. We may have to add a segment about that every week, where we talk about lines. And for you degenerate gamblers out there, we can't leave you out. So we'll see if we can incorporate that. Right now we're on a bi-weekly schedule. Wednesday is typically the one safe bet in terms of catching us live on the air. This week we're doing a Friday show. We're going to mix in some Saturday shows for you people out there who work during the week and it's difficult for you to come on or listen to the show during the day. So we'll be doing some Saturday shows as well. In our next and final segment, we're going to be welcoming Ed Kracz, who covers the Philadelphia Eagles for the local news there. I'm so happy to welcome him to the show. We've been chatting about doing this, and I'm thankful that we were able to make it happen. We'll talk about Demarco Murray, get a scouting report on Demarco Murray and Daniel Kelly, talk about the Eagles' offseason, their trades, the quarterback decision, which is historical. Ed's written about that, so happy to get his thoughts on that. And I want to ask him, about the run game expectations, and also, what to look for from their wide receiving core for Jordan Matthews, who I've drafted in a couple of leagues. I took him over the weekend. And, of course, the Titans trading Dorial Green Beckham. I finally got it right, Dorial Green Beckham, to the Eagles, and how he's doing. He sent me a video. We tweeted that out onto our Twitter timeline if you want to check that out. So we'll get his thoughts on that and more here in a few minutes. And again, we are redoing our Tuesday night webcast for NFL Female. You can catch my work there as well, by the way. And we're going to be going to a shorter format. Not Google Hangouts is going away, so that option is being taken away from us in a sense. We probably won't be broadcasting live on YouTube Live, although we've talked about maybe doing some Facebook Live stuff. We're going to be posting some video content. You can find information about that either on my Twitter page at Sports by Sharona or Sonia Greenfield, the NFL Female official Twitter page. We'll be posting information about that. So look for that. We're getting ready to take another quick break, and then when we come back, we'll be talking about the Eagles and DeMarco Murray and a lot of other great things. So stay tuned in. You're listening to Bat Talk with Sharona. All right, welcome back. You're listening to Bat Talk with Sharona. I'm your host. My name is Sharona, and we're joined now by Ed Kracz. I hope I said his last name correctly. He can correct me if I'm wrong. You guys know that I'm terrible about names, but I'm so excited to have him and to get his thoughts on the Eagles, to get a scouting report on Demarco Murray and Daniel Kelly, and, of course, see how DGB is doing with the Eagles. So, Ed, welcome, and thanks for joining me.
Hey, bravo, Sharona. You got my last name right.
Oh, great.
It's not easy to say, and you nailed it. So.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm so happy that that I did that correctly. So just briefly tell everybody who you are and who you write for and how long you've been covering the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, well, this is my sixth year on the beat with Philadelphia Eagles. I work for a company called Coffins Media. We're actually a chain of several newspapers in the Philadelphia area, three of them in the Philly area, and then there's a few out in Pittsburgh and stuff. But this is my sixth year. So I saw kind of the last 2 years of the Andy Reid disaster, and then the 3 years of Chip Kelly, and now here we are again with another head coach, Doug Peterson.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that. We're going to talk about the Chip Kelly experiment. Well, let's just go ahead and start with that. So, interesting times with the Eagles and Chip Kelly and that situation. Of course, Demarco Murray not having a very good season with the Eagles, and I want to get your thoughts on him. But I want to ask you, as part of that, and I know that because I follow Philly sports and have really followed Philly sports since the days when they picked up a former Titan by the name of Javon Curse. But it's DeMarco Murray not having a great season, and there was some indication. Of course, he was unhappy, but there was a lot of dissension, allegedly, in the locker room over Chip Kelly and his methods and how that was going down. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, it's all true. You say allegedly, but yeah, after Chip got fired, a lot of the players came out and just kind of said how, he was pretty aloof. He never really tried to build any relationships inside that locker room with the players, and that even extended into the offices inside their training headquarters, where he really never got to know any of the employees. He wouldn't say hi in the hallways, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he was an authoritarian. It was his way or it was the highway. And, when you talk about DeMarco Murray, when you talked to DeMarco last year when he was here, when you talked to him, he's like, I'm a running back that needs to get touches. I get stronger as the game goes on. And Chip he never really let DeMarco get into a flow within the offense. He insisted on shuttling in Ryan Matthews and giving him some snaps when he was healthy, and then Kenyon Barner. So to me, I think Murray was very unhappy with not only that, but I don't think he was really a fit in the zone read kind of offense that Chip ran, and he made no concessions to putting a quarterback under center. Chip would tell you, we put our quarterback under center and we hand off, but he did that very rarely, and DeMarco's the kind of guy that likes to operate in the backfield by himself and get the ball and then read where he's going to make his cut. In the zone scheme, it was kind of strung out along the line, and then he'd have to try to pick a hole, and he just never really got comfortable in Chip's offense. And, he talked to Chip, and, Chip just never relented and just continued to do things his way, and, Murray was very unhappy. So I think he wanted out. Even when they brought Peterson in, and Doug said that, I'd love to have DeMarco back, but I just think it was an opportunity for the Eagles to get rid of a contract that might have been a little higher than they would have liked, and it was negotiated by Chip because he had the general manager duties for that one season. So I think it was a good opportunity for them to get rid of him and recoup a draft pick for Murray back in what was that, the spring, I guess, when they traded him away.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, but I want to start with the authoritarian aspect of what you just said, because I think and from the outside looking in, one of the things that struck me about Chip Kelly and his methods was how regimented how much he was like Big Brother, how regimented the diet
Yeah.
and the sleep and all the monitors, and they measured the pee and all of that stuff. And I was like, man, if I were those guys' agents, I would be extremely unhappy.
Yeah, right. And he had them drinking the crazy concoctions, the milkshakes and all that ridiculous stuff. And you know what? Some players like Malcolm Jenkins, who played a league high, I think it was over 1,000 snaps last year. He swore by that stuff.
Yeah.
So there were guys that did like it, and there were a lot more guys that didn't really like it. So the Eagles did keep some of those protocols in place, and they did away with the sleep monitors and that kind of thing, and filling out questionnaires after practice. And they did away with that, but they kept some of that sports science stuff in place. But the problem with him, when you say authoritarian, was he said, "Oh, I have an open door policy. Come in anytime if you have any doubts or you want to question anything." But the players admitted after he left that they were kind of afraid to go in because they thought if they expressed any displeasure of any kind, that they would be gone. You look at LaShawn McCoy, who they traded away, the organization's all-time leading rusher. Yeah, Deshaun Jackson, he just cut him. He didn't even get anything back for Deshaun Jackson. So, you just kind of look at some of the moves that he made, and it made players kind of feel like they were on eggshells. And even though Chip said, "Hey, come on in and see me anytime," they didn't really feel like they could do that.
Yeah. The second aspect of what you just said was the touches thing with DeMarco Murray. And if you talk to or listen to a lot of running backs, I would even go so far as to say the overwhelming majority of running backs, and they will tell you that volume, that's where it's at. If you're not getting touches, it's really hard to get into any sort of rhythm, and the Titans' run game definitely suffered from that under Ken Whisenhunt. So I'm excited to see how what they do, because they are going to be splitting carries and whatnot. The thing about the Murray situation there with the Eagles, and we'll move on to some other things after this, but the thing that concerns me is that there definitely seemed to be a lack of effort. And I hadn't paid attention, but I had noticed that before. How much of a concern do you think Titans fans should have over that?
Well, I don't think they should have any concerns. I think if they keep DeMarco happy, then he'll give 100%. You look at how the Cowboys used him 2 years ago when he led the league in rushing. He had, over 1,800 yards running and 13 touchdowns and over 400 yards receiving. I mean, they just leaned on him so hard. Yeah. And I think the Titans would be wise to kind of do that, at least initially as the season begins. Get him involved, keep him involved. And I know you have Derrick Henry sitting there who looks like a real talented back through the preseason. But, kind of bring him along slowly. And then, as you build through the season, then maybe you kind of back off DeMarco a little bit, kind of keep him fresh for any sort of a championship push that you're making there in your division. Toward later in the year, and then you start working Henry in there. But if I'm Ken Whisenhunt, I'm coming right out of the chute, and I'm running DeMarco Murray as many times as I can. I'm going to get him involved early and often, and maybe bring Henry in for a series here, a series there. It might not make Derrick Henry happy, but you know what? Look, kid, you're a rookie. Murray's been in this league for years. He's been an NFL rushing leader. I'm riding that horse right now. We'll get you your time. But right now, this is DeMarco's time. That's how I would approach it. Whether he does not, we'll see.
It's so funny that you say that. And I had covered the Titans for a while, and then for the past, during the Whisenhunt era, I sort of stepped back and covered more of the NFL in general. So I returned more to a Titans-focused coverage over the off season and watching the games, watching film of the games, and looking at the stats and what have you. How they used their running backs was very intriguing to me, and I agree with you to a point. I think that easing Derrick Henry, because the preseason is a different animal from the regular season. Although I think you can learn some things from it, but I think easing Derrick Henry in does make a lot of sense. But I also think that when you look at the body of work that he put up during the off season and during those preseason games, it's going to be very hard for them not to, because he is such an incredible talent. And there were a lot of people, a lot of analysts who felt like his preseason was stronger than Demarco Murray. But there's a lot to like about both of them, and certainly they'll both get their opportunities. Real quick, Daniel Kelly, rotational lineman. I'm sorry, a rotational lineman that they acquired in that DGB trade. What are your thoughts on him?
I really like Dennis Kelly. Off the field, great guy in the locker room, very approachable. Even though he's this monster guy, 6'8", 330 pounds. But you don't feel intimidated in any way whatsoever when you talk to him. Super guy. Like I said, very approachable. So I'm a big fan of his. He's always available, and I also like how he's kind of a survivor in this league. He never got invited. Never got invited to the NFL Combine when he came out of Purdue, and yet, Andy Reid drafted him in the 5th round, and he played under Andy Reid for 2 years. Made 13 starts under, in one of those 2 years that Andy was here with him. And then they got rid of Andy Reid, and they brought in Chip Kelly, and Dennis Kelly still survived. He was still on the roster, still a valuable part of, the reserves. He was a very key reserve. And then when Doug took over, Doug Peterson, Dennis was still here. So, they, of course, traded him. But, I just think the guy has the ability to play in this league. I don't think you don't want to have him play 16 games or, 12 games. I think he gets a little exposed the longer he plays. I think the coordinators can kind of figure out some weaknesses with him. But, I think in short bursts, if you need him to come in, if there's an in-game injury or a lineman goes down for a game or two, he can give you quality time on that line. I think his best position, and even though he's 6'8", I think his best position is at guard. Some people will say that's way too big for a guard, but I think he plays pretty well in tight spaces. And I think he's a very good run blocker from that guard spot. I think where he kind of falls down a little bit is when they put him at tackle, when he has to get his feet moving and deal with some edge rushers. He gets a little exposed on the outside. But again, I think he's a guy that has been in this league for I think this is 5 years now, maybe going on his 6th, because he can play and because he can give give a team valuable minutes or even a couple of games here and there if called upon, and be successful.
Yeah, those guys are so fun and easy to root for, and I agree with you. And for the Titans, depth is a concern at so many spots for them. And people love DGB and the intangibles and that big P word, the potential. And we'll talk about him in a minute. But I know a lot of people did not like that trade. I liked the trade. Listen, DGB was in danger of being cut because he, had shown a lackadaisical, approach to some things, and conditioning being one of them, and route running being the other. And those are two pretty important things, for a young player in general, and for a wide receiver in particular. And they just had numbers, at the position, and they wanted to send a message to Justin Hunter, and he got released as well. So it's better to get something out of nothing. And so, I liked that trade. And speaking of which, this is a great way to segue into the Eagles off season and all of their trades, and get your take on how would you rate those, and how effective do you think that's going to be?
Well, I joke around all the time that, I hope Howie Roseman, the GM here, has limited minutes plan on his, whoever his cell provider is, because he really burns up the lines. I think I saw a stat today, tweeted out by a colleague of mine who writes now for ESPN.com, who said that according to Stats and Info, whatever that is, Howie Roseman, or the Eagles, I should say, in general, have made 35 trades since the 2010 season, which is more than double anybody else. So, nobody really does blockbusters even like Howie. You look at what he was able to do this past Saturday when he sent Sam Bradford, your starting quarterback, a week before the season begins, and he ships his starting quarterback to Minnesota, but in exchange for a number 1 pick next year and a conditional 4th-round pick that can get as high as a number 2 if the Vikings win the Super Bowl. I don't think that'll happen. But, that's a pick that in 2018 could even be a 3rd-round pick if the Vikings get to the NFC Championship game this year. So to be able to get something like that for Sam Bradford, who's been in this league now since 2010 and has never had a winning season.
It's crazy.
It's nuts. I mean, even the players in the locker room were saying, like, everybody's asking them, like, well, how do you change quarterbacks in a week to go before the season and expect to be successful? And they're like, well, I don't know. I've never done it before, and I don't know anybody that has. So, it's definitely uncharted waters. I mean, that was the big deal. But Bradford was a lame duck quarterback here. He was going to be here for 1 year. He was signed to a lot of money, $36 million over 2 years, this year and next year. So really, it saves the money against their salary cap. It gives them a number 1 pick back, which they had sent away to Cleveland to move up in the draft and get Carson Wentz. So, it's a blockbuster for sure. And then, I think, when you see him trading Dennis Kelly to the Titans for Dorial Green-Beckham and then sending DeMarco Murray to the Titans. I mean, this guy just wheels and deals.
Yeah.
And today they confirmed the trade. They traded Eric Rowe, the cornerback who they drafted second last year in the 2nd round, I should say. They traded him to the New England Patriots for a 4th-round pick. So, I mean, the grass really never grows under his feet. That's for sure.
You better rent your place there in Philly if you're an Eagle player, right?
Exactly right. Right. You don't want to buy here in Philadelphia with Howie Roseman in charge. That's a fact. Yeah. But
it's crazy.
We'll see how it all pans out.
Yeah, I mean, I think you shouldn't rate these things really immediately, although we media people do because that's what we do. But, in the long run, I do think that the Eagles are going to win that Sam Bradford trade. And were the Vikings desperate? Does that say more about Teddy Bridgewater's injury than what they're letting on? Are certainly good questions, but it was a lot to give up for a guy. And I completely agree with your description of him. He really, man, it's good to be Sam Bradford. I want to be Sam Bradford in my next life.
Yeah, actually, me and you both. We'll be Sam Bradford A and B because, that guy's made a ton of money, over $100 million now with this contract. And never had a winning season. He's been hurt for 2 of those years. And that said, Sharona, I like Sam.
I do too. Yeah.
He was really comfortable. The media really got to know him better here in Philadelphia in this 2nd year than we did at any point last year when he got traded here. I think he's the kind of guy that takes a little while to warm up to a situation, so it'll be interesting to see how he integrates himself into that Minnesota locker room. But this year through OTAs in May and the mini camp and then the training camp, Sam was really, he kind of joked around with the media a little bit, seemed a heck of a lot more comfortable around us, and even talking to some players that he just seemed more comfortable in the locker room this year through the training camp. And then here they go and trade him to another situation.
Plus it's hard.
Yeah, it's hard, but I don't feel sorry for him because he's made a lot of money, right?
Well, I know that, but and certainly money is, it is what it is. But he's also taken a lot of grief, and and it's hard not to let those things bother you. No matter how much money you're being paid, you're still human after all. And here he is about to learn a new offense, and Norv Turner, I'm sure he's done it before. He can do it again. Will scale things down and ease him in. I'm sure that I'll be talking tomorrow with Andy Carlson about who's going to start. I expect Sean Hill's going to start that first game against the Titans. If he struggles greatly, they may pull him and stick Sam Bradford in. But, you want to get him comfortable and get him familiar with the system before you really throw him to the dogs. And so for that reason, I think that it will be Sean Hill. But, that's kind of the nature of the beast, I suppose. And, for a quarterback, learning multiple systems is, in a way, it's kind of typical these days when you see all the change that's going on, in the NFL and all of that. But let's talk about your quarterback situation. Carson Wentz, explain to our listeners the historical context in what the Eagles are doing.
Well, yeah, I kind of wrote about this earlier in the week.
Yes,
and,
you did.
You know,
Yes.
yeah. What they're doing is they're Carson Wentz is going to be only the second rookie quarterback in the Eagles organization to start a season-opening game. And the last time, the first person to do it was all the way back in 1939 when Davey O'Brien did it. And there's an award named after Davey O'Brien, even though he struggled, back in 1939 in his rookie season. He threw 6 touchdowns to, I think it was 17 interceptions. So, the Eagles are really stepping out of their comfort zone by starting a rookie in the season opener, at least historically speaking. Now, it's been done through the league, of course. We've seen it.
Yeah.
It seems to be happening more and more recently. Of course, Marcus Mariota, right in your backyard there, he did it last year. And, Jameis Winston did it in Tampa, and Andrew Luck did it. Robert Griffin III, who, interestingly enough, will be here in Philadelphia Sunday.
Well, we're going to see
Eagles
Dak
open the
Prescott
season.
do it.
Yeah, and that's right. Dak Prescott, who was a 4th-round pick.
Yeah.
And they're the only two rookies that are going to start out of this draft class this year, Carson Wentz and Dak Prescott. And really, Dak is starting because of an injury to Romo.
Right.
And, of course, Carson's starting because of that crazy trade of Sam Bradford. So I don't know whether that speaks to how good or bad this draft class was for quarterbacks, but, we're going to see. It's interesting to see Prescott and Wentz in the same NFC East together. And they'll probably play each other twice unless Romo comes back or something happens to Wentz. So it's crazy, but the Eagles are doing it, and they're not backing away from it, and they're very confident in Wentz. Doug Peterson spoke this morning about how he showed up to work today at 5:45 a.m. He peeked in the film room, and there was Carson Wentz already breaking down film of the Browns. So
that's
the kind of
encouraging.
kid he is. Yeah, he's a very bright kid. Never got a, everybody says he never got a B in high school or college. 4.0 student his whole life. Very smart kid, picks things up quickly, which is all well and good. But the speed of the game in the NFL is going to be kind of an eye opener for him, and I think it might take him some time to adjust to at least that.
I was shocked by the decision. How shocked were you in light of all the injury reports and concerns with him?
Well, I think he was. They said they held him out of the preseason finale because he broke 2 ribs in the preseason opener back on August 11th, and they didn't want him to play in the final game 3 weeks later against the Jets because they said his rib wasn't one of the 2 ribs wasn't 100% healed, but I believe that he was healed. I think that the Eagles and Vikings had already opened up negotiations toward this deal of Bradford because Teddy Bridgewater got hurt on Tuesday going into that preseason finale. So I think the Eagles kind of wanted to protect Wentz. He's fully healthy. That won't be an issue. But, yeah, it was still a surprise on one hand. But on the other hand, if you look at their other option, Chase Daniel, I think that would have gone over kind of like a lead balloon in the locker room. Because and Chase is a great guy, but everybody knows that he's a backup and he's a backup for a reason. He's been in the league since 2009. He's made 2 starts. He's thrown 80 passes. The players know that stuff. So, here players are disappointed Bradford's gone, and now you're going to throw Chase Daniel in there. I mean, they probably would have came out as flat as a pancake on Sunday. So here you named Wentz your starter. There's some juice that they send through the locker room. There's an electricity that will be in the crowd on Sunday against the Browns. And, whether Wentz is ready or not, we're going to find out. But I think the Eagles had to make that move and start him on Sunday.
Yeah. I want to ask you about the wideouts and the running games. But before we get there, how real is the concern about the offensive line with the suspension of Lane Johnson? What are your thoughts on him? And it was interesting looking at, as I was preparing for this show, I'm always intrigued by brother duos in the NFL. And I had forgotten about Jason Kelce, who, of course, is the brother of a rather good tight end in the league.
Yeah, Travis Kelce in Kansas City is his brother. And, Jason Kelce has been the center on this team. He started from the day one that he was drafted back in, I guess it was 2011. He came in the 5th round out of Cincinnati. And, he had to adjust the center. He went to college as a linebacker. But, he's kind of the guy that makes that line go. He's the anchor in the middle. He's the one that makes the protection calls. And, him and Carson are going to have to be on the same page with their protection calls against the Browns. But you mentioned Lane Johnson. It's kind of weird that, this information about him failing a drug test leaked out back, almost a month ago. And, Lane has been very open and talked to every reporter. He loves to talk to reporters. And he said that he sent his B sample out, and he hasn't had word from the NFL if that B sample's been tested. So he's going to play on Sunday. He's going to line up at right tackle. In the off season, he became the highest paid right tackle in the league with a monster contract. So he's good. He's got talent, but how long they can count on him for is still up in the air, because it's really strange how the league hasn't ruled on this suspension yet. I mean, he's facing a 10-game suspension. Yeah, very odd. And even Lane kind of hinted earlier in the week that even if his suspension comes down in the next few days or next week, that there's a chance he could appeal, and then that buys him another 3 or 4 weeks. So now you're looking into October. He's still your starting right tackle. Meanwhile, the kid that they drafted in the third round, this kid Isaac Siamalu out of Oregon State, they like him. He's kind of developing, learning how to play the line. And then if Lane does get suspended, and I say if, a few weeks ago I would have said when, but we just don't know now. But if or when Lane Johnson gets suspended, Siamalu can plug in at left guard. They can move their left guard, Alan Barber, out to the right tackle spot where Lane plays. It's not your best offensive line because Lane's not in there, but it's a very serviceable offensive line. And, of course, that's going to be important to keep Carson Wentz upright and healthy as the 16-game season unfolds.
Yeah, that's a great point. And talking about the NFL drug policy and all of that is way beyond the scope of what we can do, because I know you're going to have to go. And I do want to ask you, because we talk about fantasy football, I want to ask you about the wide receivers and the running backs. But you make a great point, and I certainly hope that when the renegotiations come up and when the drug policy is looked at again, that there will be provisions for timely resolution of these things, because not only does it impact the player individually, but it impacts the team so greatly, not knowing. Here they are preparing for week one, and they don't even know, they certainly, in my opinion, cannot suspend Lane Johnson right now again, and that game is upcoming like that. That would, to me, would be like the worst thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it would seem pretty unfair. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, this should have been resolved. I agree. They need quicker resolutions. I mean, this should have been resolved weeks ago when it first came out. Not now. Here we are on the brink of the season starting, because now at any point when that suspension comes down, it's going to be, all of a sudden you're going to have to readjust. And I think there's a bunch of things they have to revisit. I think the marijuana issue and the suspensions regarding that. It's legal now in a few states, and there's some things they need to address in the next collective bargaining agreement. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Real quick, the wide receivers, DGB, you were so kind to send me that video. How is he looking? Sounds like he's going to be, it certainly sounds like there's some discussion he might not make the roster, but give us your scouting report on him. Sure.
It's me and some other colleagues that cover the team. We talk about all the time. You say you like the trade, getting Kelly for DGB, who may have been cut. But up here in Philadelphia, we scratch our heads like, how could the Titans give up a 23-year-old kid with this kind of ability, who's a basketball player, really playing football? He caught that touchdown pass against the Colts on a fade pattern. I mean, that's just going to be a big part of this offense, is that fade pattern. Once they get in the red zone, they're going to take at least one shot to DGB. And I think the Eagles are not trying to overwhelm him with too much information, because, like you said, he's got a history of being lackadaisical. Maybe not giving the full effort all the time, but, I think that maybe he looks at this as a wake-up call, this trade. I know the players. Yeah, I mean, Jordan Matthews is on this team. Him and Jordan Matthews, who's from Vanderbilt, they worked out a lot this off season and the season before that, so they're friends. Jordan's a quality guy, just a great guy. I think
local
I think
kid went to Vanderbilt.
Yeah, Vanderbilt kid, great, very bright kid. I think he has a future in this league after football, doing whatever he wants to do, an NFLPA or in the commissioner's office. But I just think he's that kind of kid. But him and DGB have kind of hit it off.
Good.
So Jordan's taking him under his wing, and I think the Eagles just aren't trying to overwhelm him because of that history of lackadaisical play, not 100% effort. So they're taking it slow with him, but there's going to be packages for him in the offense, and I think he's going to have a pretty nice year, to be honest.
I think you can couch that win for win for everyone.
Yeah.
I think that it was a win for DGB. The Titans are trying to remake their locker room, and maybe there were some elements to that locker room that weren't steering him, in that right direction, and he needed a change of scenery, and they want to bring in the Titans, they want to bring in the guys that their guys, because it's a new regime, new GM, new coaching staff, and there was certainly a strong indication that DGB wasn't always on the same page with Mike Mularkey, who had issued him some very clear directives, and he still turned up to training camp out of shape and under condition. So, it can be, I think, a good thing for everyone involved. I'm glad to hear that hopefully, he will get straightened out. I love Jordan Matthews. Great to hear that. Zach Ertz, is he going to be a big part of that offense?
Yeah, I think that's the plan. He was a big part of it last year. He only had, I think it was 1 or 2 touchdown catches. I think they want to kind of up that a little bit, but use him a little more in the red zone. But, he did have 75 catches for, over 800 yards last year. That's a pretty darn good year for a tight end. So, I don't know if he'll hit 1,000 yards or anything like that, but I think what you might see from Ertz is his touchdown totals will increase, which I think they're going to need. But, like I said, DGB can be a weapon in the red zone. I think Jordan Matthews has had 8 touchdowns in his first 2 years in this league, 8 as a rookie and then 8 last year. So he's got 16 touchdowns. That guy can find the end zone. So, he's a guy that's going to be a part of that red zone too. And then you look at the running backs, you talk about fantasy football. Darren Sproles, I think, would be a great pickup for somebody. He's going to be
I've got
used
him
a
all
lot.
over the place. That's why I was just getting ready to ask you because, and before we turn there, I want just real quick, Brent Selleck, is he going to have a role in this offense, or is he just the blocking guy?
Well, Eagles love Brent Selleck. They love everything about him. Off the field, just a great leader in the locker room.
I love him. Yeah.
Yeah, 10th year player. Whether offensively, production wise, I don't know. He'll catch some passes. I don't think he's going to be a big part of what they want to do.
So he's just going to play that vulture role, right? He's going to be a vulture. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good description for it. But, the Eagles are going to use a lot of 3 tight end sets, and they're going to run the ball out of that. So another guy to keep an eye on is kind of the unforgotten tight end in Philadelphia is Trey Burton.
Trey Burton.
Yeah, he's a guy that I think they're going to try to find ways to get the ball in his hands too. So I can't tell you how many catches he's going to have or touchdowns, but he's going to be involved in the offense, and he's a pretty good pass catcher.
All right, I'm talking with Ed Kracz, a great guy, covers Philly sports. Real quick, we sort of touched on this, the running back situation. Reports out of camp were that Darren Sproles I love old man football, listen, but he was the best running back of the group. Ryan Matthews, obviously, still some injury concerns with him, given his history. And since you just mentioned him, I have Darren Sproles in probably 3 or 4 leagues.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you. Yeah, he's not really your traditional running back type. He qualifies, I guess, in fantasy as a running back, but they're not going to give him the ball a whole bunch to run it. But they're going to use him a lot out of the slot. They're going to put him in motion. They're going to run him on wheel routes because good luck to a linebacker that has to cover him. That guy's he's a water bug. But he's a great kid and a guy they like in the locker room. They extended his contract past this year, so they love him. They're going to use him. Peterson's talked about it. He really didn't get a lot of work in the preseason because he is 33 years old. They want to kind of preserve him, and but he's just a guy that when game day gets here, boy, he answers the call. He's going to return punts. He's probably
that's what I was going to ask you. It sounds like he's still got that role too, which is amazing. He's like the Leon Washington. I remember the days of Leon Washington, and that was still getting it done at 33 and 34. Yeah.
Yeah, I love watching Sproles when he gets the ball because he just can accelerate. He can go from 0 to 60 like a sports car. Well, I've never owned one of those, but he can get from 0 to 60 in a hurry, and he just is so fast and he's so low to the ground, and the way he just darts and cuts around, he's just fun to watch. So he's still getting it done in the kick game. I think you can pencil him in for at least one punt return for a touchdown this year.
Is Kenjon Barner going to get any touches, and how many touches per game do you think Ryan Matthews will get?
Well, Matthews is going to be the guy, the starter. But you mentioned the injury history. Excuse me, with him, and really it's just because it's the way he runs. He's so physical. He'll try and run you over. He'll hit you. He's not one to cut out of bounds. So that's kind of what leads to his injuries. It's just he's a very punishing runner, but. He's going to be the guy, and if he can stay healthy, I think he could have a 1,000-yard season in him. In order to keep him healthy, I think Kenyon Barner will get some touches. I like everything about Barner's game. I don't think he's as good of a receiver out of the backfield as they would like, but he's a very good blocker. He's another hard-nosed runner. He's going to get some touches for sure. And then they have this rookie. I'm not sure he'll be active on game days early on, but someone they're pretty high on out of West Virginia, Wendell Smallwood.
What about his injury? How's his injury coming along?
Well, he had a quad injury through most of training camp, and then when they were set to give him plenty of touches in the preseason finale against the Jets, because he missed the first 3 games with the quad, he got a concussion early. So he only had a handful of touches in that final game against the Jets. So, kind of he's the wild card to me through the OTAs in the spring and before he got hurt in training camp. The kid shows a great ability to catch the ball, which they really like, obviously, because they're going to use the running backs in the pass game a lot. But he has the ability to catch the ball. Now it's a concern. Can he stay healthy if they run him too much? He hasn't shown that he can. So, we're going to find out about him hopefully sooner rather than later, but I'm not sure they'll activate him on game days quite yet.
All right, one final thing. I love Doug Peterson. Good luck to Coach Peterson and the Eagles this year. What are the expectations? What do you think? How many games do you think they should be expected to win?
Yeah, well, it's kind of weird here in Philly because everybody's got very low expectations in terms of wins and losses, but everybody loves Carson Wentz. So I think they're going to have to do it with a defense that's coordinated by Jim Schwartz. Of course, he was in Tennessee there for a long time as the D coordinator.
Love Coach Schwartz.
Yeah, boy, he's a real, he's a real stickler.
He's a firebrand, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. Yes, he is.
Do you still listen to heavy metal?
I don't know. I'll ask him. I don't know.
You should ask him. Yeah, he's a metalhead.
Okay, good to know. Anything else you can tell me that I can kind of
I
get
better
a
not
little
share
bit?
anything on the record.
All right, I understand. Yeah, he's going to talk tomorrow. The coordinators talk tomorrow. But, yeah, the defense is what's going to have to kind of be the hallmark of this team. And, hopefully Wentz can kind of, they're going to try to control the clock, I think, with that run game and the short passing game and try to keep Wentz upright. So I think expectations, wins and losses, I don't think anybody in the media anyway is looking at anything, more than 7, 8 wins at most. But, we'll see. I mean, you got a rookie head coach, a rookie quarterback. Not a lot of success along those lines. I know back in 2012, Colts did it with Chuck Pagano and Andrew Luck, both rookies, and they won 11-5, finished behind I think Houston, but they made the playoffs. So we'll see. I mean, it's hard to predict anything more than 7-8 wins.
It really is. Since you mentioned it, and I hope you'll forgive me for keeping you 1 minute longer. I wanted to ask you about this. Since you mentioned it, Fletcher Cox, the return to the 4-3 defense. They experimented with a 3-4. How big a year is that guy going to have?
Big. I just saw odds out of Bovada released some odds out of Vegas, 8.5 sacks.
Wow.
Is what the over/under is. So I'm thinking the over. I think Schwartz is going to find a way to get him. They're going to line him inside, outside, and that guy's he's a handful to block.
Yeah.
I'm
excited.
I mean, he'll get double teamed, but he can defeat double teams. And if he doesn't, then that's going to open it up for someone like Benny Logan, who's kind of an unheralded guy on that defensive line. And Of course, you have your pass rushing ends in Connor Barwin, who's been doing this a long time, and Brandon Graham and Vinnie Curry. I think they're going to get after the quarterback, and Schwartz is going to find a way to have this team probably in the top 3 to 5 in the league in sacks by the end of the year. And Cox is going to be a huge part of that.
Yeah, I really like the former defensive coordinator, but I love me some Jimmy Schwartz, and I hope that he has a successful year. And it was such a pleasure. I kept you too long. Tell everybody out there where they can find your work and find you, especially on social media.
Well, my Twitter account is at KRACZE. KRACZE is my Twitter handle. And if you want to check the Eagles, just we have a bunch of different websites, but the easiest to remember is the www.theintel.com, and then you can, hit /sports/Eagles, and it'll show you all the Eagles stuff. So
awesome. We'll tweet all those out, all those links out. Thanks again. Have a great day.
My pleasure, Sharona. Thank you.
All right. That was Ed Kracz, who covers Philly sports. Great chatting with him. I'm excited to see what Jim Schwartz does. Very underrated guy here with Tennessee. Great defensive coordinator. Of course, had the rather unsuccessful stint with. Overall, I think his Detroit Lions years. I mean, he certainly brought them back to life and had a year or two of winning seasons, but it's going to be, I think, fun to watch that defense. He did a great job in Buffalo, and I think ultimately he'll end up getting another opportunity to coach, the top position, another head coach gig. He's a young guy, and I'm sure that he learned a lot from the situation in Detroit, and I'm pulling for them. It's going to be interesting to see how the Eagles situation does. So, all right. So that's it. We went a little longer than an hour and a half. That's it for today. You have been listening to Back Talk with Sharona. Shout out to my buddy Matt, as always, for the Chopping It Up segment, and to Ed Kracz, who joined me in that last segment to give us his scouting report on DeMarco Murray. And I think I said his name wrong, Mr. Kelly, the offensive lineman, and how DGB is doing in Philly, and we certainly wish him the best. We wish him well, and in his new home. And to you, our listeners, thank you for listening. We will be back on Friday, as we mentioned, with that big super show. I'll be sitting down tomorrow and recording that podcast with my buddies at Beer, Barbecue, and Football, and also with Andy Carlson at Purple for the Win. We'll be previewing the upcoming Titans-Vikings matchup, and how that I'm very curious to get his thoughts on the trade, too, with Sam Bradford and the situation with Teddy Bridgewater and how these two teams are going to match up. Big fan of Mike Zimmer, Coach Zim, and I know that Minnesota is happy to have him, and my heart's going to be torn a little bit this weekend because I do have mad love for Coach Zimmer, and I'm very excited to see this game in person. So looking forward to that chat, and of course with my buddies at 7:30 Yahoo Sports in the morning, Talk Back Live, talking about the Titans and the NFL. Tonight, Going for Two. Tune into that, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, our last show via Google Hangout, and we'll pour one out for Google Hangouts and talk about our fantasy draft this past weekend, which was a lot of fun. I get a ton of grief for drafting Titans players, but, listen, no regrets. I do not care. It's kind of exciting. It's been a few years since you've been able to really draft any Titans players, besides, of course, my main man, Delaney Walker, my fantasy boo, Delaney Walker, who is always such a pleasure to watch. And so we'll be talking about that and a lot more stuff. So tune in to that, 8 o'clock p.m. And then, of course, on Friday, again, Andy Carlson and Lisa London and Jeff Lloyd joining me, and we'll replay that Purple for the Win segment. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. I hope that you have a great, great Monday, and we'll be back again on Friday, 10 o'clock a.m. Central Time with another episode of That Talk with Sharona. You can follow me on Twitter at Sports by Sharona. And if you want to be a guest on the show, hey, hit me up.
Beyond the horizon of the place we